In this video, we will try to fix the problem that we were facing before, which happens to be the fact that if you decide to execute this file using the Python interpreter, you'll get this traceback error that we saw in the last video. So in order to deal with this situation, there's really only one way to do it, which is that the greet and the execute files have to be in the same path. Otherwise, the Python interpreter will have no clue how to handle it. And so the way that we can handle this situation is by simply moving the execute function into one of the other subfolders. And so luckily for us, it's not a hard thing to do. I actually did it, but I'll show you how I did it. So what I can do is you can just drag the file into version 2 and it moves into version 2. So if you want to move it into version 1, you just select it and just drag it inside version 1. And now they're both in the same place. So now all we have to do is if we try accessing it, let's see what happens if we keep it like this, where imagine that you're already in new. Then would this work? Well, let's find out. So let's actually first cd into new. And if you're in new, then let's say you decide to say Python version 1, and then let's say you do execute.py. So if you do this, you can see it says that there's no module named version 1. So we're not out of the woods just yet. So in order to handle this, what we need to do is we need to remove this version 1. Let's put greet just like this. And now let's actually go inside version 1. And if you do that, if you do Python and then you do execute.py, now you can see that it says hello. So what we are seeing here is that with the Python interpreter, the rules are more strict. It's not as flexible as the relative paths that we saw with the Jupyter style of using Hydrogen or even a Jupyter notebook. And we can see that the assumption is that these Python files themselves are modules. So that means that we have to keep them in the same location. Otherwise, Python will not understand it. If you use things before that, like version 1 or new or things like that, those are just directories, right? Those don't actually happen to be modules. So with Python, it's completely module specific. So this whole idea of the file structure, like the folders and whatnot, none of this even matters in the context when you use the Python interpreter. Now, one thing that we might be tempted to do is think that right now, in order to do what we did, we had to go into version 1, right, in order to do all this. So is there a way for us, like if we were to stay in Python as asset transfer, would we still be able to do what we did? And it's an interesting question, and I believe we could say yes to that, but in order to do it, we need to import something. What we have to do is we have to use something called the OS module. So from the OS module, we're going to use a method called chdir, which basically means change your current working directory. So as you can imagine, right now in the terminal, I'm inside version 1. So my path is done in such a way where if I just run execute.py here, I know I'm going to get my result. But what if I were going backwards and if I were to do like a cd ... and then another ... Now it takes me into Python asset transfer. So if I'm inside Python asset transfer, then it's quite interesting because within Python asset transfer, we already know that all these files are inside version 1. So what if I tried running it here? I said new and then version 1, and then if I said execute.py, well, check that out. It looks like it still works. So you might be wondering, how is that possible, right? Like, how is it possible that it still works? So what I am tempted to tell you here is that the reason that this works is because whenever you're using the Python interpreter, the directories that we had before are no longer important to the outcome. It doesn't matter whether you're in version 1 or version 2. As long as all of those Python files are in the same place, then when you're specifying to execute a file from wherever you are, if you try to run it, it is going to work. It's going to work because it's in the same place. Doesn't matter which folder it is, but it's in the same place. Now, as you can imagine, that if you want your file system and your Python files and modules to be interoperable with each other, then it seems like what we did in the last video makes a lot more sense, right? Where you know that there's a specific location where you want to import something. But when it comes to the Python interpreter, we don't really have that flexibility. And that's what I wanted to point out in this video. So there is a way to resolve the problem where you just move, one file to the other's location and we would be good. But bottom line is that, that doesn't really have a nice vibe when you really do have a situation where you have files that are coming from different places and you want to be able to reference those locations somehow. So that's why I would recommend that the Jupyter style of using the relative paths in order to get to a Python file is very flexible, and at the same time, it's a nice to have. So if you want to exploit those kinds of functionalities, then you would need to set up either Hydrogen within your Atom environment, or you would have to use a Jupyter Notebook. And I'd be happy to help you get set up with those things. All right, well, that's pretty much it. I hope we all learned something new today. So thank you very much.